Sweet as, give him the thumb.
Ready?
Yep.
Okay. Yep.
Great.
Now just be aware, Dave, that if you don't duck behind barrier, you're out of shot. You can talk about absolutely anything.
Okay.
Oh.
The thing I like about dogs is they don't steal your truck or gold.
Okay. Right, so one of you please tell me where we are and the significance of this place to the Unknown Blues story.
Well, here we are out the back of the Waverley Hall in Invercargill. This is where we played our first gig on a Saturday night, and I think we're all a bundle of nerves. We had our gear set up and there were lots of people in the hall, and we came in and I think Dave needed some sort of something to drink before he went on stage, and away we went. We just started the gig sort of getting into some pretty, I think it was Roadrunner, wasn't it, Dave? The first one, Judgement Day?
Judgement Day was the first one.
Yeah.
Because it was going to be Roadrunner, and I remember having half a flag and a beer with Podge McPherson and thinking when a Bible class joined, what you're going to do on Judgement Day would be far more appropriate to start the show with. But we did Roadrunner in the course of the evening. Yeah. I only remember this because of the old scrap. Judgement Days, that was the first song we ever played.
But I think that the guy who was running the show was a minister, and we were pretty loud and trying to imitate the bands we'd seen down at Pacific Theatre, and he came up and told us, look, you're too loud, and I think we more or less said, well, you can get next, and wound it up a bit more. And carried on. No, I used an old Saxon word. And finally we were thrown out, and as a protest, Hoagie did a solo of Parchment Farm, and I think we sort of sloped off, didn't we?
Well, that's right.
Had a party.
Because I think he actually went out and rapped out the PowerPoint screen or Amplifiers. Shut up.
Stop.
But he sort of took into account that the PA was still turned on.
Yeah.
So I had a harmonica about the big and I kept playing while they're dragging you guys out.
Dave, can you tell me about the maracas and how this gig led to the wild and savage reputation of the Unknown Blues?
Yeah, that was in the first song, and you know.
I need you, rather than that, can you say? Okay. Can you work my question into your answer?
The first song we did, Judgement Days, I mentioned before. As soon as the band started playing, to me it sounded really good, really loud, and the stage was elevated a bit. And there's a lot of people there, and they were going crazy from the outset. So as soon as Paul starts his first solo, I'm shouting some maracas, and I just threw them towards the back wall, and they shattered, and I think that kind of, they just broke, smashed against the wall, and that sort of, everyone screamed and went crazy, and I thought, this is good. Started rolling around the floor or whatever, and the volume went up, and then we were out. I don't know if we came out this door, but that's where we were.
It was almost like Dave was a very quiet guy. Even in rehearsal, he was very considered and sort of thinking about what we should do, and very, very polite, because I didn't know him very well. And when he got on stage, it was as if he had an instant sort of metamorphosis, and this wildness came out, and he was just, I'm going to do whatever I like and bugger everybody else. You know, it was really, I was probably in a bit of shock as well, you know.
Barry, what do you remember about the gig, and how would you describe how well prepared the band was? How good was the band at that point?
Yeah, we were still practicing. We practiced here. No, it was a good night. I used to drink a lot in them days. I don't recall it a lot, but yeah, it was a good night. I remember leaving it.
But we had some practicing guys.
Yes, yeah.
Like down at the Garrett Brothers' house where Barry was living, we would often be several nights a week sometimes.
Yes,
we were really serious about getting it right.
Yeah, we drink and play all the time.
Well, figure, I'm still like that, you might as well take the intoxicants you can have when you're rehearsing, because that's how you're going to play.
Yes.
So this gig was in large part responsible for you getting your reputation as the wild and savage unknown blues, and helped you draw crowds after that. It's a good start, really.
I think this gig was a great start. I think we got a little bit of something written up in the newspapers, and obviously the teenagers were talking about it.
Sorry, kerosene
I think this gig was a great start. We sort of took off on notch 10, and we were talked about, and the next time we had a gig, a lot of people rocked up to see us, and a promoter by the name of Frank Stapp, who I knew a little bit from previous bands, he sort of got into the wavelength and started booking us everywhere he could get bookings. So yeah, it was great, and we got our own crowd from it. But it merged over into the party scene. Like often after we played, we'd have parties and people from the dances and that would come back, and so we got to be friends with a lot of the people, and actually turned them on to the kind of music we were listening to, so they started buying the same records and ordering them from shops, and a subculture began to be built up around it. You'd see people from dances in the street and say, "Oh, have you heard of this record? Oh, where can I get that?" and so forth. And so, yeah, it started something entirely new.
Was there anyone else out there at Invercargill?
No way as well.
Can I work my question into your answer?
Okay.
At that, if you could say the date, at that time in 1966.
At the end of 1966 in Invercargill, when we came on, like Maud said, we started off on a pretty high level, and I think a lot of the excitement, well, let's just say, our fellow teenagers, there was nothing quite like us. And that's not a bragging thing, there's just nobody looked like us, no one was doing the material we were doing. And I mean, we weren't just doing pretty things in stones, I was doing stuff, we were doing Temptation for My Girl, and them, and it was quite not like the normal bands around town were playing what they heard on the radio. We went out of our way to play what wasn't on the radio, and the people liked it. The young people liked it, and the guy Vaughan mentioned before, Frank Stapp, he was an entrepreneur in Invercargill going back to the days of the World War II, like swing bands. And he just sort of got onto this. Oh, this is exciting. He called everyone master. The John Master. And this is an exciting new band. So he was responsible in many ways for booking us in the Orange Hall, the Buffalo Hall, Scottish Hall. Frank would hire all these halls and put us on because he knew we had pulling power, so to speak. That was how he looked at it, wasn't it?
And he used to...
he was great.
He would text the ads that appeared in the newspapers, so a lot of those little ads, sort of spin your night away with the unknown blues.
Wild and Savage, they would have come from Frank's masterful, the thing is, the tradition he came from would have gone back to the 1930s or 40s. He was a real old-fashioned promoter, and his wife, Renee Ward, was a professional dancer, and Renee would sit on the door, and she was always beautifully presented and dressed up.
Coiffured up like a ballet dancer.
So he had a lot to do with us getting all those gigs.
Yeah.
You can't...
He did, yeah.
There's no... And he was a great guy, and in those days, of course, there were non-licensed venues, and we'd be sitting out the back having a quiet one with beer, and he'd say, "The game's not on, master, you've got to hide that, you've got to put that away." But he'd never say, "Don't do it." You just sort of, you've got to hide that, you can't take that on the stage with you, kind of thing. He was great. Old Frank was fantastic.
Now, talking about those subsequent gigs, but none in any particular detail, but I just want you to talk a little bit more, and you, Barry, in particular, about what sort of live... We've never seen you guys, like most people have never seen you guys. Describe for me what sort of live act you were. What would you have seen and heard if you got an Unknown Blues gig? I'm just trying to work my question into your answer.
What did you think of us, Barry?
I enjoyed it. That was really anybody else. I thought it was good band. Just 12-bar, we played a lot of 12-bar music, and I just like 12-bar music. I don't like pop songs, the stuff that other people play. I just like the 12-bar blues side of it. it's relatively simple music, and it's got feeling, not like pop music. It hasn't got no feeling. You can't bang your foot to it. I like to bang my foot to it.
I sort of remember a lot of the places we were playing. We were usually playing with at least one other band, sometimes two other bands, so you'd have half an hour on, half an hour off, and we usually would go on second, which means that if you had another band come on first and they started to get the reaction from the crowd, when we got on we would ramp it up. We'd start off with something really fast or something really loud, and it was a little bit like you were giving yourself a hit as well. If you had the sound good, well, you were feeding off that, and things just seemed to get better and better and better. Then all of a sudden you'd break it down into a really quiet blues number, so you'd actually get people gathering around the stage to listen, and you played to the audience a lot, you know.
Yeah.
And just very briefly, can you give me a day perhaps? Can you say the equipment we were using?
The equipment we were using was fantastic. We had Jansen Amplifiers, which, you know, the great New Zealand, highly sought after things now. We had all that stuff. Rocket's father was an electronics whiz. He built Rocket's big bass rig, which was bigger than anything money could buy, wasn't it? It was fantastic. Yeah. Wombi always had a great set of drums. You had that beautiful Gibson 335. Barry had a left-handed Fender that all came from, bought them at the shop in Dunedin. Bristol Piano Company. Yeah. And we went up there and went out of our way and got stuff on hire purchase and got really good equipment.
I've still got my amplifier.
Yeah, we did. I don't know how much of a conscious effort it was. We just wanted something that was the loudest and was going to give us the best sound.
And you hunted around for good mics and ended up with a big AKG, didn't you?
That's right.
And I made up a special stand for it so you could hold it like a broadcasting quality mic.
We did spend a lot of money on it, you know, because we were very serious about being a good band. Weren't three of us playing for a cheap little amplifier. We got the best we could get because we wanted to drown out everything in sight. And those Jansen amplifiers were fantastic. I wish I still had one.
We've had that big amplifier Rocket told me he's built for.
Yeah, that's what we're saying, the big bass rig that he had. You couldn't buy anything like it. His father built it.
And when sometimes amplifiers started to get a bit tired, like you'd have to change valves, or on occasion you'd have to change the whole amp, replace one amp with another one and just upgrade all the time.
But that's a bit of an in-joke because sometimes 30 watt amps would turn into 50 watt amps without the shop owners knowing about it.
You take one out for a loan, when it come back it wouldn't be quite the same because it had a different guts.
So names shall not be mentioned of the shops or the people.
Long time ago.
Perpetrated those particular crimes, but when they thought they were selling little 30 watt amps on the stage, sometimes they were 50s and 30 cases.
Okay, I'm happy with that, guys. Was just finally, the reputation that you established here at your first gig started to attract Antarctic Angels and people to. I guess there probably weren't that many Angels at your first gig, but
no,
I don't think they existed.
No,
honestly, they did not exist. The guys that came to our
Can I get you to? Yes,
I'll just blow my nose.
Sure. If I can get you to say something like.
Because some of those people came to our gigs, I'll tell you off camera, Simon, the Antarctic Angels didn't exist. A lot of the people, like, there's been a few things written in, like, Stranded in Paradise book and things like that about the Unknown Blues connection with the Antarctic Angels. Now, that's fair and true because we were friends of those people, but at our early gigs, the Antarctic Angels didn't exist. A lot of the people that went on to form that bunch of guys riding motorbikes, they formed that afterwards, but they were here, you know, a couple of them. They'll speak themselves on camera later if they want to. And they went on to form their bike club and that after, but the Unknown Blues existed long before the Antarctic Angels. But we were partying together and having a good time together as teenagers in Invercargill. We're growing up in the same streets, going to the same schools, cousins, that kind of thing. So that's where the connection was, you know, how the whole thing, and when those guys formed that club, they just kept going to go out, they just had slightly different clothing on.
I think Vaughan was the only one that had a motorbike.
Yeah, there was a bit of a crossover going on, because I bought a motorbike off one of the guys who was one of the founder members of the Antarctic Angels. I had a patch with Antarctic Angels on my jeans jacket, which was a homemade one, but the group, the Antarctic Angels, weren't a formally created group. It just sort of evolved from Roy Reid and I think maybe Graham Paul, and conversely, Roy Reid, we started teaching a few guitar chords, and he used to help us with our gear, and on the occasional occasion he'd be up on stage with us. So there was this sort of crossover thing going on. And Anthony Wilkes, another member of the Antarctic Angels, I can remember painting one of his bikes for him, the Triumph I had. I was trying to think yesterday who I sold it to, I can't remember, but it was a melting pot, and although the band was a separate identity, the Antarctic Angels and the Unknown Blues used to party in common. We used this, even some would live together with one another in flats and party together, and girlfriends would go from one to the other over a period of months. Like, you might be taking out one girl for a few months as a member of a band, but in 6 months' time she would be a girlfriend of somebody in the Antarctic Angels. You know how young people move around. So we didn't clearly define them. It's probably sounding a bit funny, but
No, it's not.
it
I'm
was.
just smiling.
Clear, just keep the mic.
Yes,
Keep
yeah.
spaces. Okay, and just finally, guys, this hall, which looks very unremarkable and is quite common throughout New Zealand and in Invercargill, but this is really typical example of the sort of venues that you had for live music in the mid-60s. Can I get you to just explain that point and describe the sort of atmosphere that you would have found inside, and whether there would be lots of booze, whether there would be any crowds, what, you know. I just want an overview of the sort of live music scene and the facilities that existed.
Okay. You want me to do this, guys?
You can do that.
Well, when the Unknown Blues started, entertainment was in coffee bars and in halls that are just typical of this, that are right throughout the country. They were a hangover from the days where you'd go to a dance and you'd get supper, you know, like a cup of tea and bring a plate, but you know, there were bottles of Coca-Cola, maybe a cheese roll or something. There was no alcohol in there. Drugs, as far as we knew, did not exist, you know. But there was a fair bit of drinking and fornicating in the car parks. That's all I can say about that, you know. So, you know, there was that teenage thing, but this is very typical. Now, the other venues, like in a lot of cities in New Zealand, are the old Masonic halls, like the Orange Hall, the Buffalo Hall, and they were, so it was either the church hall or the Masonic halls, you know, and they were the places for hire where people like Frank Stapp would, they would hire them for the evening, put an ad in the paper, employ a couple of bands, have someone on the door, charge their whatever it was to get in, I don't remember.
To the 5 shillings or 2 and 6 pence or something.
You're dating yourself now, boy.
Yep.
And that's pretty much what it was. And later, a little bit I might add here, you can edit this later if you like, Simon. When these people decided, you know, the crowd, the element that we were attracting was a bit rough, the gigs dropped off in Invercargill. So we just figured out, I don't know if Vaughan thought of it or we collectively did, we ended up hiring a couple of halls ourselves, and I worked as an apprentice compositor in the printing trade and printed up these little cards that had the Southern Blues League, and you know, you were invited to a function at the Colwood Bay Hall or a Woodend Hall, and we would sell these for $5 or 50 cents to people, and then we found out we were getting around a 18-gallon kegs of beer, and after the gig you had to use these big scoogies to clean the floor because it was swimming. It was definitely an alcohol-filled culture, just like a footy club, folks.
Yeah,
you know,
Ocean
like
Beach was going.
Ocean Beach, and Roy and I were working at the Ocean Beach at that time, and Roy knew a lot of the Cook Island guys that were working at the freezing works, and he hired them as bouncers. So you had all these great big friendly Polynesian guys on the door that made sure that people sort of behaved themselves. However, what went on...
Was Roy responsible for them?
Yeah.
I remember them being there.
And there was quite a bit of fighting going on out the back and that, and lot of drinking, but they were really good nights, weren't they?
Of course they were.
Were they?
They were, yeah, they were.
Maybe we could do a run of tickets. Hire the Orobuki Hall and see if we can do it again.
Not much better or
That's what I mean.
Okay.
Thank you. About this high off the ground, I think. But it wasn't very high. Yeah.
Okay, boys, just walking past nice and casually. We'll just get your feet in the windows.
So here we go. Now another thing I remember here at this gig was the night I met Templeton and Wombi, because they were standing on a they were jumping up on a
Dancing away.
You were right.
You were right. They probably were. There you go, boy. This is for the flower power people.
Hey, don't you get out of it.
Do you? Really?
Sorry.
You'll see it.
Just want to get no
Rolling.
traffic. You might as well stop. Not yet. Just wait for this.
Rolling.
Okay. Nice. Good. Yep. Happy with that.